Now, when it comes to this game, Franklin said it himself, nothing tears a family apart like money, and now we're seeing the cracks beginning to appear with Franklin's family, because he wants Jerome and Louie to come back home so they can work under one roof. But Louie and Jerome are done with Franklin making all the calls, because they know themselves as well as we do. He made some wrong decisions last season, and picking Manboy over Skully was one of them, and we're gonna come back to this later on in the video. But as Franklin got the issues with Jerome and Louie, there was another brick by brick moment where we saw the return of the season 3 Franklin Saint, when he told Louie that there was nothing that he was prepared to do. And when Franklin Saint said this, you know he meant it, because he is definitely back, and nothing is gonna get in the way of him and his future, especially not Teddy, and he doesn't trust Teddy at all, because he definitely senses that something doesn't add up, and Teddy being a little paranoid himself. And I do feel what he did with Alton in Cuba plays a huge part in him being paranoid and watching Franklin. But we're gonna run through all things episode 3 with how Franklin warned Louie, Skully coming back, and Louie making the right call, and the rest. But let's talk about Franklin's moves, because he was someone who put a huge distance between him and the streets. He's got a house high up, far away, and he's also made himself the middleman between Grady and his organization, and that's how he was making money. Well, while he was under Grady anyway, but the problem is he promised Louie, Jerome, and Leon that he'd get the product for 9k. But with Teddy being back, he said the prices were gonna stay the same, which was 10. And this caused Louie a problem, because she made a promise to Skully, and she tried reasoning with Franklin, and tried to get a sit down with Teddy. But Franklin knows that if Louie goes above him to Teddy, then maybe he may prefer working with Louie. So where does that leave Franklin Saint? So when it came to this sit down with Franklin and Teddy, it was clear why Franklin liked working with Grady on a business level and a personal level, because Teddy is someone who's straight business, who will always want some level of control over Franklin, because under Grady, Teddy was watching Franklin move with a lot more freedom, and Teddy definitely didn't like the way Franklin was doing business, especially with the way he made himself the middleman, because he's the one who's created the problem with Louie and Jerome, and Franklin knows this game, so he knows very well what Teddy did to Grady, because there is no reason for Grady to sell his assets and put his house up for sale, but Teddy would never tell him the truth, and he knows it, and the same goes for Alton. He knows something was off with Alton's disappearance, but Franklin's relationship with his father was a lot more complicated, because he even basically said, whatever happened to Alton, that was on him, and this was cold from Franklin, but it doesn't mean that he was done searching for answers. Even though Alton betrayed Franklin last season, when he was working with Irene, he still wanted to get down to the bottom of his disappearance, and that's the real reason why this sit down happened with Teddy. But Teddy looked him in the eye and told him that he had nothing to do with Alton disappearing, being killed, or whether he's just sitting in a prison cell in Cuba, because he was a part of the Black Panther, and someone like Alton would have always had a target on his back. But you could tell that Franklin definitely didn't believe him, he just couldn't prove it. And I'm sure we all sensed that Teddy was up to something when he said he wasn't gonna go to the re-up. So we saw Teddy sending Gustavo to the drop on his own, but the location and the timing of everything just fell off with Franklin, and he was right to keep his head on a constant swivel, because when he was questioning and trying to get answers to what happened to Grady, he realized that Teddy may have been watching him. And this is when he really did show his intuition, his smarts, and how he has his head in the right place this season. So he stopped before he said anything else, and he was right to do so because Teddy was watching him, and now he knows that Teddy doesn't trust him. So talking about Teddy spying on Franklin, it really does show how paranoid he is after dealing with Alton, because he knows that Franklin suspects him of Alton disappearing, and there is definitely trust issues between them, even though they said they worked together before and it's just gonna be business as usual. Franklin doesn't trust Teddy, and Teddy's clearly paranoid himself. We even saw how he stopped smoking and how he stopped taking any drugs, and that's because he wants to be in his senses when it comes to doing business this time around with Franklin. And Franklin and Teddy are two people who have grown smarter and definitely more wiser. Franklin knows that he made mistakes early on, and we're watching him trying to be 3 moves ahead, but so is Teddy, and now we're gonna see this real chess game and battle between Teddy and Franklin Saint. So the dynamics between these two characters for the rest of the season is gonna be interesting to watch, because we can all sense they're gonna come head to head at some point. But let's talk about Louie, Jerome, and Skully, because Skully was back this week after he survived the gunshot wound from last season, but he was back to his old biblical sayings and his crazy ways with his sword. But Louie knew that she had a problem on her hands, because she made Skully a promise, which Mello said that she had to tell Skully herself, because sometimes there is no reasoning with Skully, as we all know from past seasons, and it really depends on what day you catch him on, and unfortunately, it was baby Tiana's birthday. But Jerome and Louie owed Skully because of their past history, so she stuck to a promise of dropping the price, but she knew that this was also a problem for them, because she's not making any money either. But they had another problem, and that was Mello's ambitious ways, and they knew that Mello was lying, because this is something that Louie and Jerome have seen before, and they had a choice to make. They either back Skully or they back Mello, and Louie knew what the right decision was, because at the beginning of season 4 when they had to pick between Skully and Manboy, at the time Jerome wanted to pick Manboy because he saw the crucifix move that Skully made, and that was still fresh and raw. But despite how crazy Skully is, Louie still wanted to side with Skully, because if you let him be, he's someone who stays in his lane. Manboy was someone who was always after more territory, always causing trouble, and had more of an ambitious nature to move up in the game, and eventually we even saw him trying to find out who the Connect was, so he could go above Franklin, and this is exactly the same shit that Louie would have been dealing with Mello. But last time the problem was, Franklin Saint made the decision. This time Louie was the shot caller, so she shut that shit down straight away. And I definitely think she made the right call, because after the information that she got on Mello, she knew that he was just going to be another up-and-coming Manboy. So Jerome and Louie set the whole situation up at the strip club, with Mello and Skully at the psychic spot, where they would have told Skully what was going down. And they also did this because they owed Skully, and there is definitely some respect between them, even after the death of Khadija and Tiana. But let's talk about this between Louie and Franklin, because tensions are definitely rising, because Franklin won't let Louie speak to Teddy. The prices aren't changing, and there's nothing that Louie can do to change this. And Franklin said the prices aren't the problem. It's Jerome and Louie breaking away from under Franklin, and this is a Franklin Saint problem, because Teddy doesn't care about how he gets his money, as long as he's getting paid. But the reason why Jerome and Louie went on their own was for their own protection, and because Franklin was making some bad decisions last season, which he was, and the Skully and Manboy example that I gave earlier on was just one of them. But here's where we saw the moment of the episode where we saw the season 3 of Franklin Saint return, where he made his threat and warned Louie that he wants to enjoy the money that he's made, because he knows that Teddy made Alton disappear, and he can do the same shit to them. And this was the same Franklin Saint who told Leon that he built this shit, brick by brick, and he wasn't gonna watch him tear it down. And he told Louie there is nothing that he's not prepared to do, and Louie and Jerome would have heard this loud and clear. Now I really wouldn't be surprised if they turned around and started getting their product from somewhere else, because like Franklin Saint said, there is definitely plenty of competition. But also, is this the start of Manboy's prophecy coming true, because he did warn Franklin that his family will turn on him, one by one. So as much as Franklin Saint is back, he needs to be careful, because nothing tears a family apart like money. But elsewhere in the episode, I really do agree with Jalil in the comment section of the last video that Peaches has AIDS, and you could see him coughing and sniffing again in this episode, and it just shows how much of a big problem it was back in the 1980s. There was also Wanda, who looked good, and someone who's trying to stay clean, and now she's got a job with Franklin Saint, and that was episode 3. And of course the huge talking point is the return of the old Franklin Saint, and how he's prepared to do anything to get his. So drop all your comments down below and let me know what you made of the Franklin Saint and Louie exchange. Drop all your thoughts down below, and of course if you're new to the channel and you haven't done so already, then remember to smash the subscribe button if you want to see everything Snowfall and Power Universe related. But as always, thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you next time.